Hey friends, welcome to the Empowered Homes Podcast. Purpose of this podcast is to grow strong families by connecting church and home. And today's podcast in the studio, I have the one, the only Jenn Cooley.
Hello.
Hello. So my bride is with us today, and we've done, I don't know how many episodes we've done, you've been on.
I think this is only my third.
Third? It feels like a lot.
I know. I feel like I'm in here a lot, but
Yeah. So this is your third episode with us. So how do you think the last ones went?
I think they went good. Smooth,
yeah. So this one is a special one because we are going to talk about a very emotional and dramatic thing. I wrote an article based off something that we've talked a lot about in our marriage, but the article is called "The Most Dangerous Emotional Threat to Your Marriage." Bum, bum, bum.
bum, bum.
And I wanted to talk about this. So if you're listening, we're gonna hit the most dangerous, or one of the most dangerous emotional threats. But I think this applies to all marriages, but specifically, as we were talking this morning, I think those in ministry. This is a big one, but it applies to everybody. But we're gonna come from a place. So, Jenn, how long we've been married?
15 years in August.
15 years. And of those 15 years, how many years have we been in ministry?
Since before we were married.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We did ministry together. So like 17?
Yeah.
17-ish together.
I started doing ministry in 2004. Yeah. So whatever that turns into. So it's 19 years this year. And we've been, even before that, we're doing ministry this whole time, and we did it together and all that stuff. But what we're about to talk about today has to do with that, but also really anything. What were you going to say before I cut you off?
Oh, I was just going to say that we're just going to talk a lot about us.
Yeah.
Like as a married couple, not just like couples in general.
Yeah.
It's a lot about me and Bobby.
So we're gonna divulge some personal things and some struggles and different stuff, but then give some feedback of like what's helped us through this, and then some practical steps for the listener to take. So the most dangerous emotional threat to your marriage. People are listening going, just say it already. What is it?
I'm ready for you to say it.
Are you?
Yes.
You're on pins and needles. Waiting on it. So I think it's not even a real thing. I don't even know, like, I think I made it up. I may not have. So if you're listening, it was like, no, I've heard that before. Comment in whatever your platform you're listening to. It's like, no, you got this from so-and-so. Maybe I read it in a book. I don't know. I think it's a new term. But the term is, ready? Do you know it?
Yes. Stop. Just keep going. Let's go.
So the term is resentful support. So resentful support is where essentially you want to support your spouse, but secretly you resent them for it. So I'm going to give some generic examples that may relate to anybody, and then we'll talk about how this plays itself out in us. So
Anybody. You, Jenn Cooley.
While driving to the airport, a couple begins to fight because the husband's going on a business trip and his wife's staying at home. The wife feels upset because her husband is leaving town, although she understands he must travel for work. She resents that he gets to travel. And so she's not saying it, but it causes some conflict internally. But then if it's not dealt with, that conflict is seen in other ways. Here's another example. A wife accepts an incredible job that she's always dreamed of. Her husband tells her to go for it, but then complains when the family schedule changes and resents that she's not home as much. And so, again, I want to support my spouse in whatever they're doing, but then resentment is held behind the scenes. And so what this looks like, it starts to play itself out in different areas. So shutting down communication, that's a big one. That whenever this occurs, communication just suffers because, like, I want to support you, but if I tell you exactly the way I'm feeling, it's going to cause some conflict, right? guilt, comparison, shame, passive aggression, which that never happens in our house.
Never. We're not passive people.
Manipulation, complaining, unfair expectation, and withholding intimacy. And so for us, this resentful support it's played itself out in many different ways. And I asked you this morning, like, what are some examples that we've had, Jen, that you've supported me, but yet there's a little bit of resentment there?
I think just especially whenever you were in student ministry.
Yeah.
And because the first few years of student ministry, I was working and you were working. We didn't have kids. And my schedule at work was super flexible. I made my own schedule. So if you were working late, I would work late. And if you were gone, I could mark out time and I could go on a trip with you, or a mission trip, or to camp, or to lead a retreat. And then we had a baby.
Yeah.
And all of that stopped. And I remember, like, I was at camp pregnant, and then I was not at fall retreat because we had a tiny baby.
Yeah.
And you just hanging out with, as I said, you're hanging out with other people's kids and not our kids. Like, or I guess our baby at the time.
Yeah.
And I knew that was your job and that is what you're called to do, but I felt like you left me kind of in the dust.
Yeah. But I didn't leave you. I wasn't going, yes, I
No,
get
no,
a
no,
week
no,
away
no.
from my kids.
No.
Or from you. I don't have to hang out with
No,
Jen.
I just felt like I was forgotten.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how subtle it comes up.
Yeah,
And
because we were so excited to have a baby, but I don't think that we knew exactly like the dynamics
that
it would shift. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had another baby, and then we had another baby.
Yeah.
And we're still in student ministry, and you're still taking trips and hanging out with kids.
Going and doing all those things.
And even like where we were at the time, you had to leave early to get to work.
Yeah.
And then if you said that you're on your way home, it would sometimes be 45 minutes before you got home. And just you being gone all day. And there was some resentment because I'm at home with children. And then I guess after Chandler, our daughter, I quit my job.
Yeah.
So then I was home all the time. And I love our kids. They're great.
Yeah.
But just to like get out and to feel needed, not by just our kids.
Yeah.
Like I felt like you had a role to fulfill, and I was just Bobby's wife.
Yeah.
At home with the kids.
Tagging along. And
Yes.
Just second.
Yeah.
And, for me, in that moment, in that time, to be honest, like I didn't see any of that.
Right.
Like you hid that for the most part. I don't know if you did that to protect me or to make sure like I was.
Well, I knew that it was your job.
Yeah.
Like this is how, like we loved our church. We are paying the bills this way. Like we love these people.
Yeah.
So I knew that like this is what was going to happen. And my job was to stay home with the kids. I was just mad.
Just mad. Secretly mad. So when all that was going on, like who'd you talk to about that stuff?
I guess my mom, and then my friend Aaron.
Yeah. And all of that stuff.
Yeah.
To be able to, and it's hard because, and I'll tell a story of my resentful support towards some of your stuff, but it's like, it's hard because it is good things. It makes sense.
Yeah.
It's there's nothing like, I didn't think I did anything wrong.
No, you didn't do anything wrong.
But that resentment came forward and things got ugly. We had days where like we were fighting and arguing and passive aggressive, and it's just, it would come out of nowhere. And there's times where I did cause, because I'm an idiot. I would cause some friction, but there's times where I would literally go, I have no idea what I did.
Right.
Like, what did I do wrong? And I think a lot of times resentful support, you have one spouse that has this or withholding this deep down in, and the other spouse is saying like, what did I do wrong? Like we agreed on this. Like we talked through all this. You said you support it.
Yeah.
You said you were on board.
And you've told me before, you can't get mad at me for going to work.
Yeah.
Like I know
Yeah.
that's dumb. Like I can't be mad at you for going to work.
Yeah. but then that weasels its way out if we don't talk about those things.
Right.
And that's why I think it's the most dangerous emotional threat, because emotionally, like, it causes you to experience all of these things, and it lashes itself out in other areas if it's not dealt with, if it's not communicated, if it's not talked about. And you know, for me, like, there's been times where you've wanted to take trips or to do things or go hang out with friends, and I've had to readjust schedules or whatever. I'm like, I want you to go have a blast. I want you to have fun and you know, take this trip and go do all this stuff. But it, like, causes me to shuffle a ton of things around. And so, you know, selfishly, I think that's the other side of it too. It all comes back to selfishness. Selfishly, like, I resent it, even though I want you to go and do whatever you want to do. I'm sitting around, and it affects, like, how I'm with the kids and my emotions with them and my attitude with them and, like, my frustration. And I'm trying to make sure you don't feel guilty for going and taking a trip with your girls or whatever it is. That's just one example, but it's I think for me, I'm not saying that you're selfish. I would never say you're selfish. My wife, love of my life. But for me, it comes from a place of selfishness. And the sooner I realize that, I'm like, okay, that resentment, it's still there, and we got to talk about it, but it diminishes a little bit.
And I think in the beginning, whenever I was felt left out or lost or whatever, I think that was selfish too, because I wanted your time. I didn't want you to hang out with other people. I wanted you to hang out with me because I like you.
Yeah. And that's part of it too. If you want time, you want time with your spouse. I saw there was this video that was going around, and someone sent it to me, and it's a counseling friend, and it was this wife who was throwing a fit because, have you seen it? She was throwing a fit because her husband would come home from work and see the kids or whatever, and then, like, would go do the dishes. And she's like, why am I just boiling mad that he went and did the dishes? I am furious. It's not that he did the dishes, it's that she wanted him to come home and sit with her for a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Even though doing the dishes is on point.
Yeah. If I did that every day, like, I'd have all the brownie points in the world. I know. What do you call it when I do the dishes in the middle of the night?
In the middle of the night.
Yeah, the dish fairy.
The dish fairy came.
Yeah, the dish fairy came. But, like, it's those subtle things, like, or she said in the video, she said, you know, or he's mowing the grass and he's doing stuff around the house and he's hanging out with, and doing, like, projects or whatever.
Being a good homeowner.
Yeah, like, he's not doing anything wrong, but she has this resentful support, and it just drives her crazy. And she said it triggers just this furiousness in me. And then she says, like, it's because essentially, like, I want to be the center of his attention and time. Again, goes back to selfishness. But how silly, like, even watch that video, I was like, this lady's crazy. But it's a reality that the selfishness will breed out of this. What are some other examples we've had throughout the years? Not just work and different things like that.
I think before I had a good core friend group here, like, you had a good core friend group, and you like, I guess you already said it, like, you took trips. Yeah. Or you said I did, but like, you took trips, and I, like, longed for that. Yeah. And it's a little resentful.
Yeah, you resent me for taking trips. And
I think I just resented you. I was frustrated because I wanted what you had. Yeah. Selfishness, I guess. Yeah. And I wanted friends. I wanted to hang out with people. I wanted to live a fun life. Yeah. And I mean, I've got great friends now.
Yes, you do.
Party all the time.
Yeah. And I think the other side too, just for us in ministry, our age of our kids are different.
Yes.
Like, they're fun. You know, there's different stuff.
It's easier for us to be at home by ourselves for the weekend with just the kids now. Like, if you go somewhere or if I go somewhere, than it was even 3 years ago. Yeah. Like, it's completely different.
Yeah. And on that note, I think it's important to make it clear too, like, we don't keep score.
No.
Like we don't like, okay, I got to go on this hunting trip or fishing trip, and now you get to schedule yours, and then we go back and forth. Like there's times where like you go with your girls, you do all that stuff, or you go with Chandler or whatever, and like it's more than me. And then sometimes my trips are more than like. I think that's a danger too. When this comparison that creeps in, but also like this idea that like we're tallying it up to make sure we're even.
Yeah.
It's okay. Like I think that's where resentful support plays itself in too. It's like, well, you got to go do this, so now I get to do that. Go. Like I think so many couples I sit and talk with and counseling, it's this very thing of like, well, he did this, so now I'm entitled to this. Like that's a whole nother. There's other issues going on if you're feeling that. I think it should be open communication. Like. Before I say anything, you have veto power on my calendar, not my boss.
Right.
And I've often heard like, if your wife has veto power over all the decisions, like she's running the house. Like no, like I have veto power over your calendar too. Like this is a team. Like we're working on this together. I asked you even the other day, like, hey, I got asked to go on a hunting trip, and immediately it didn't work in our schedule, and I'm not like throwing a fit about it. I'm like, okay, it's fine. And so when it comes to like specifically like with those, I think that's a big thing in marriage. It's like we got to keep score, and if we're not keeping score, then the resentment comes. Like, you got to get rid of that mentality, unless it is really out of balance.
If it's been a year since somebody's taken some
alone time or whatever, that's a whole nother podcast to talk through that, because then there's just so many layers of that, of like, well, the wife has all these friends and is doing all this stuff all the time, and the husband doesn't really have any friends, and so he just stays at home and he has resentment. Well, buddy, get out and make some friends. Dude, that's on you. That's not your wife's fault. Sorry if you're listening.
It's not your wife's fault. You don't have friends.
Yeah, if you're listening, you're like, oh man, stepping on toes. I'm sorry. Like, take ownership of your own stuff too. And I think that's what's helped us is like, one, we've been able to talk about it. I know because we have been able to talk about it, like whenever there's things that pop up in life that I need you to support me on, like I'm clear about it. Like, hey, this is a big deal. And vice versa. Like I know there's stuff that pops up with you to fight back that resentment. So I just wrote some thoughts on that. Anything else?
I was just going to say, I think for a long time now, whenever we are talking about something, it's always us against the problem or the situation instead of like you and the situation against me.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's
or
100%,
me and the situation or the problem against you.
Yeah.
Like we're
together.
Yes, we're together.
We're facing against
against the conflict or the whatever.
The issue, because regardless, like we're linked up,
right?
And we're facing forward together, as opposed to facing each other,
right? Because we're a team.
Other. Yeah, and we have to be.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to resentful support, like if you're not talking about these things, it's going to fester and cause more damage and conflict if you let it. But it may be hard to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Like early on,
I think we just yelled at each other.
We would just fight because you can't be mad at me for going to work.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
or taking a trip.
Yeah.
That has been on the calendar for a year.
Yeah. Like that you said was good.
Yeah.
And I can't be mad at you because you're doing this concert that you've already paid for and planned it and did all this stuff, which I don't care. But like communication is key. And I think if you're not talking about it, it's going to be difficult early on. I like when we first started bringing it up, like it was ugly.
It was,
But now we're at a place so much better. We look past it and we call it what it is. And we're not perfect at it.
No.
I'm not.
I'm not.
Yeah. You're not?
Stop.
Yes, she admitted it on camera and over podcasting. I'm just kidding. I love you. So here's the things to combat resentful support. So the first thing that I wrote was assuming the best. Like I'm gonna assume the best. Too often we assume the worst. Like she's only planning this because blah 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 blah, or he's only doing this because blah 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 blah. And like we work up this scenario in our mind that most of it's not true. It's founded on nothing. But we don't assume the best. We assume the worst. We assume that my wife only wants to get this promotion so she's away from the house more, or whatever it is. Like, how do we get to a place to assume the best? With the example of the wife getting the new job, the husband wanted to support her opportunity to pursue her dream, but selfishly didn't want to take on additional family or household responsibilities. In his selfishness, he would work himself up each day, and when his wife would come home, he would put on a smile and ask how it went, but in his heart, he was fuming. Each night, the resentment kept building and building until the end of the week, they had a blow-up fight. We've never done that. Now, this is a fake guy. I don't know what this is about. But
Are you sure you made this up?
In order to assume the best, there's some questions you have to ask yourself to process your emotions. So personally, if you feel this fuming or this vibrating within you, Jen, I support you, but I've got this in my heart. Here's a few questions. What are you feeling? So asking myself, okay, what am I feeling? What's the real emotions here? Maybe I'm sad, like that, I don't get to go whatever it is, or I don't get to be a part of this, or something. Maybe it's fear of, I don't know how this is going to end. Maybe it's anger, just straight up rage, like the woman who was raging on her husband for doing the dishes. Like, what's the emotion, and name it. And I would challenge, for me, it's helpful, and maybe it's just me, but like to write it out and to journal and to write out and name what am I feeling? That's the first question. The second question is to ask, what are all the possible intentions? Like, make a list of intentions that your spouse may have. Like, so let's just go back to the scenario. Like, you want to take this trip. What are your intentions for the trip? Like, why would you want to go on the trip? Wants to have fun with her friends. Wants a break. Wants to refresh herself.
Come back a better mom.
Like, to list out all the possible intentions, and even the things that you may have that are negative. Like, she can't stand us, and so she needs to get away, or selfishly, like whatever. Write it out. Think through it. And then the third one is name your assumptions. And so what I mean by that is processing through the questions as you approach your spouse to diffuse the emotions. Name your assumptions. What are the things that are not true that you're just assuming? So, like, list all the possible intentions, but then, like, what are you assuming? And if you're assuming things that are negative, you're assuming things that are unfounded, ungrounded, you have to call it for what it is, and throw it out the window, And then you can have a healthy conversation. Because if I'm in a place where my emotions are high, whatever I'm feeling, I'm only looking at the negative intentions, and then my assumptions are all these things, I'm going to come at you hot.
Yeah.
And so before you have a conversation about it, assume the best means that you name what you're feeling, you look at the intentions of your spouse, and then you name your own assumptions before you even have the conversation. Because a lot of times, if you don't do that, it turns into immediate fight.
Yeah.
And then it's confusing for your spouse, because, like, we talked about this and we agreed upon it, and yet
I thought we were on the same page.
I thought we were on the same page. Like, I thought we were good. And a lot of couples, like, that's a whole nother podcast too, but there's several couples that it doesn't matter what happens. There's resentful support.
Yeah.
Is not going to be there because they don't know how to assume the best. And that's a whole nother episode. We'll do that next week. So that's the first part, is can we honestly, for each other, assume the best? What do you think of that?
Yeah, assume the best.
Yeah. How do you assume the best with me?
I know that you are not out to get me.
Yeah.
So, and I know that you are not the bad guy.
Yeah.
And you have my best interest at heart, and I know that.
Yeah.
So now I assume the best. Like if you are at work late, I assume the best. Like you're working on something that needs to be done. Otherwise, if it wasn't a priority for you, like you would be at home. And I think because we've also fought it out and we've talked about all of this.
Yeah.
And it's taken a minute, but I don't know.
No, that's good.
Does that make sense?
And I know you're not being sneaky.
No, I know.
You're not doing anything that, that's assuming the best and knowing that like whatever pops up or is good for you is good for me.
Yes.
And
yeah. And it's good for our family.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah. And so I think that's the key too, of like we compare or we feel like we have to be on some type of level playing field, but like a win for you is a win for me.
Yeah.
And when I see that and know that, that's assuming the best. Like when you get to go away or whatever it is, we keep going back to the trips because that seems to be
that's our season.
That's a point of friction for a lot of couples of
Yeah.
like, well, the work or trips or whatever.
But I think also it's just parenting alone.
Yeah.
Like whenever you know that you have a spouse that's helpful and supportive at home and then they're gone all the time.
Yeah.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard not to be resentful.
Because it would be better if I did nothing at home, and then it would be the same when I leave, right? No, I'm kidding. Don't do that either.
No.
Be a good parent. So the second part of assuming the best is the first one. The second part is make everything discussable. And so for us, we've had to learn this. There's times where it's just a fight, after the kids go down or it's whatever, or, after we drop off the kids, we just argue. So making it discussable. If you're holding on to resentful support, you must ask yourself, what's the real source of my resentment? And if you feel like you're receiving resentful support, you must ask yourself, what am I missing? And so if I have resentful support, if I'm fuming or whatever, like what's the source of that? Because sometimes that source has to do with external things that has nothing to do with you.
Right.
And so I got to be able to name that, my resentful support that you are doing this and I want you to do it, but I'm resentful because the source over here is I've gone through a lot of things, with work or with friends and I've got to juggle all of this and now you're doing this. And so like it has nothing to do with you or whatever. I support what you're doing, but on the outside, like I've got other forces that are playing too. And so sadly, our spouse usually gets the worst of it. And it shouldn't be that way. And so if you are presenting resentful support, you got to ask, where's the source of it? And then if you're feeling it, I think another question. So if I feel like
Jen didn't like me today.
Jen's mad at me, I did something, what did I do? I think it'd be arrogant and stupid of me not to ask a question like, am I missing something here? And even asking you, like, hey, what am I missing? Because I thought we were good. I thought everything was fine. And making it discussable. And so one of the things, a pro tip that, it's not as formal, but having a secret word or phrase that you can come up with as a couple to be like, hey, we have to talk about this. This is serious. And for us, like our phrase, pots and pans, means lots of things, but specifically like, hey.
Pots and pans just means this is important.
This is important, and we got to talk about it.
Yeah.
And so, that's a whole nother podcast for pots and pans.
Pots and pans.
But
it had to do with
yeah,
doing the dishes in the very beginning.
Yeah.
That's another podcast.
Yeah. So being able to be like, hey, we need to talk. And when you say that or I say that, we diffuse. We're not angry. We're not. We have no assumptions like going into it. Like it's listening time. So if you call that out or if I call it out, it's like, all right, here we go. And it just makes the conversation so much healthier. And I think as we haven't had it in a long time, but it calms us down so that we can actually have a conversation instead of just biting each other's head off. So
we've come a long way.
We have. So for the listener out there thinking about this, the most dangerous emotional threat to your marriage is resentful support. Mm-hmm. There's other things, obviously. It's not the most dangerous. There's a lot of variables, but I think it's one that's not talked about, and I think 100% it's not talked about in ministry. And so if there's ministry leaders, I'm not saying to send this to your spouse, this episode to your spouse, but like maybe it's worth y'all talking about these things, because I know too many partners in ministry that their marriages have suffered because of this very thing. But it's not just ministry people. It's anybody. Yeah. We can all face and battle resentful support, but I know for sure ministry leaders, it's a big deal. And you've been around ministry wives for a long time and have seen it with them too, right?
Yeah.
The last thing, as we're talking, going into, looking at your marriage, examining your marriage, assuming the best, making it all discussable. I think one key for us, that again, we're not perfect at it.
No.
We're not perfect at anything.
No.
I'm not. You're better than me. Is whenever we do have these conversations and we make it discussable, like we do our best, or we try to do our best not to do it in front of the kids. Because they're watching everything.
Yeah.
And they're watching how we interact, and our sweet oldest boy's tenderhearted, and he's worried about anytime we're just joking around with each other, he's worried about we're fighting or whatever. And so a key to a lot of this,
I think we keep serious conversations like away from our kids.
Yeah.
But if it's just like an everyday discussion or an everyday disagreement, we don't hide that from the kids.
Yeah.
So.
Because if we do it in front of them, and the other side too is guarding what you say when the other spouse is gone.
Right.
Like if you're on a trip and I'm frustrated because you're gone, I am not going to, your mother, well, your mother decided to go on this trip or whatever it is. They pick up on it and it's harmful and it's damaging, and then they will produce the exact same thing towards each other, towards us. Resentful support can easily be passed on, and they can easily feel the same effects of it emotionally. And so like even our kids, like when one sibling gets something and the rest of them don't, like, are you happy for them that they got this? Yeah. But then you see this creep in of like, yeah, I'm happy, but I'm also really mad that they got blank and I didn't. So helping them not to be selfish, again, that's where it all starts. It's the source is selfishness. That's a big deal. And it's really hard as you're raising kids, not to raise them to be little resentful supporters too, and letting them assume the best, because that's what we're doing in our marriage. We're a reflection to what we want them to become.
Right. And
so we want them to assume the best, and we want them to be able to talk about whatever comes up. So anyways, any final words on all that, Jennifer?
No.
Jennifer Nicole. No. Thank you for today. Thank you for chatting with me. If you're listening and want any more information or want to listen to our other podcasts, because we're a dynamic duo here, we'll tag that on the description. And then we will also have all of these emotional resources on Empowered Homes. You can find all of those things. You can find this article that breaks all this down. But our biggest hope and prayer is that maybe you're listening and you've felt this in your marriage, but now you have something to call it.
Yeah.
And now that you have something to call it, you can name it. Now you can work on it. So that's our hope. That's our prayer. So if you want any of these resources, you can find them at empoweredhomes.org. If you have any questions, you can email us at podcast@empoweredhomes.org. Jen?
Yep.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
It was fun.
Yeah, I love you.
I love you.